This program is a paid commercial announcement and in no way represents the views of WPHT or its management.
Cheek Media Partners presents The Adam Malamut Show. Real people, real perspectives, real opinion. Presented by the law offices of Adam Malamut and Associates. Powered by InjuredWorkers.com and driven by Piazza Premium Automobiles. Now, live from the Malamut and Associate Law Studios, The Adam Malamut Show. Hosted by Adam Malamut.
Memorial Day weekend, and we welcome everyone in. This is the Adam Malamut Show. Real people, real perspectives, real opinion, right here on Talk Radio 1210, WPHT.
Thanks, Krause. It's great to be back. Today, our guest is a South Jersey native, Holy Cross graduate, University of Maryland graduate at TERP, traveled in more than 30 countries, lived in Spain to study Spanish, talk about hardcore and immersion, worked in medical device sales, participated in more than 500 heart surgeries. I get a little queasy thinking about that. Has an MBA from Columbia, played in the NFL for the Dallas Cowboys, and he is the author of the Transition Playbook, How Athletes Win After Sports. This underachiever...
It's a big list, Adam.
This
That's a big list,
underachiever is only 31 years old. Not making me feel real good about myself right now, but I'd like to welcome my friend Phil Costa.
Adam, thank you for having me in today.
Welcome, Phil. So, Phil, we got to clear the air.
Yeah.
Which football team did you like as a kid?
Eagles, Eagles, growing up.
All right, because I'm going to tell you, I sat next to you at a Philly game, Eagles-Dallas, and your quarterback went down with an injury, and I saw the pain on your face, and obviously there's a personal relationship there. But I was a little bit concerned that I was bringing the enemy into friendly territory here.
Well, here's the thing. Now, Cowboys all the way. You know, I'm a Cowboys fan. I played for them. So being from South Jersey, I get a pass. You know, and not many other people you'll get a pass for that, but I feel like I get one for that.
You're giving yourself the pass.
Exactly.
All right, nobody else is giving you the pass, but you're going to give yourself the pass.
I will, yeah.
All right. Well, when the Cowboys aren't playing the Eagles, are you still rooting for the Eagles?
Eagles do have a spot in my heart for, even though, you know, we were enemies when we played. You know, just growing up being an Eagles fan, you know, they definitely do. They're number two to me. All right.
Well, how about the family? Where do they fall?
So family and friends couldn't wait till I was done playing for the Cowboys. It took my brother a month to put the hat on for the Cowboys. And I have friends who they would come down and they're in the family section of, you know, they're surrounding with Cowboys family. They're wearing Eagles jerseys. They're spilling beer on the family. It's just like, you know, they still stayed true to the Eagles, but they would cheer for me, but they stayed true to the Eagles.
Well, we appreciate the fact that they carried on our tradition down in Dallas.
They did. They represented well. Don't worry.
That's great. So every kid has a dream when they were a kid. At some point, what they want to do. What was yours?
So I always thought I would be FBI. So I studied criminal justice at the University of Maryland, and I was going down that path early on.
What kind of student were you?
In high school, it could have been better. You know, and I straightened out when I got to college. I was an honor roll student throughout college, but, you know, high school could have been better for sure.
So at what point did you realize it was time to buckle down?
You know, it was really probably my senior year of high school where, you know, recruiters would come in, and this is something I tell college or high school athletes all the time is you make a recruiter's job so much easier when you get good grades. They don't have to worry about you in that aspect. So it's probably for me senior year.
So Holy Cross, you get back there at all?
I did. I was there a couple weeks ago. Ran into the kids and stopped by the weight room. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Were the kids out shining in the weight room? You still have it?
They were trying, man.
You still have it?
I haven't touched a bench press in a long time, but yeah, they have Tim Durkin is their head football coach over there, and he's trying to do, and I think he is doing a lot of great things to bring that program back to where it was.
Now, Maryland's a tough leap to the NFL. I mean, there's been some great players that have gone from Maryland to the NFL. We know about the Frank Wychecks, and I can't recall his name, but there was a great defensive tackle.
Randy White.
Well, Randy White, but even more recently, how did you make it from Maryland down to Dallas?
Well, I knew day one I would be in the NFL. It's the exact opposite of that, where I didn't start to my third year down there. I was fortunate to be able to go to Maryland, but that was the only big school that offered me from high school to college. From college to pro, I was a free agent. Nobody wanted me. I was undrafted. So it was definitely not, here I am, throw my helmet on the field and I've arrived. It was the exact opposite of that.
Let's talk about high school sports for a second. This is important because, as you know, I have 2 young children, and one of my big frustrations is seeing these parents coaching up their kids, thinking that every single kid's going to be a pro. More often than not, and especially for the younger set, I find that they're coaching their kids up and they're making them disinterested in sports. As a kid, did you play multiple sports?
I did. So I played basketball, baseball. I was on the high school golf team, high school football, high school basketball. So a lot of different sports, yes.
I think we just found our fourth for our next charity foursome.
Let's do it, man.
All right, good. So what's your take on student athletes and young children playing multiple sports?
All for it. I think college coaches want to see that. And actually, we were talking before the show about, pro soccer, female soccer players. And I was speaking to a neuropsychologist who's working right now to write a book with a pro soccer player in New Jersey. And the thing that she's writing about and talking about is, it's called, the one chapter is the car ride home. So the car ride home is, what are parents saying to the kids? And I was very, very lucky in this area where my parents, what they did was they would say, did you do your best? It was never, did you win? How'd you play? It was, did you do your best? And if you can say yes to that, nothing else matters. And that's one thing that, might make the book, she said, as we were talking. But, it was some great advice that my parents did for us, for myself and my brother.
It's interesting. And I know that I always ask my son that, and my daughter's involved in theater, and we'll have those same conversations, but with respect to a different activity. Do you feel that parents have kind of changed over the past 10, 15 years in how they approach youth sports?
Well, Adam, look at, the college, scandal that's going on now with the admission scandal. But, to bring it back to youth sports is, let the coaches do their job. Parents, be parents. And I know it's really, really hard. If you see something out there, maybe you don't like what the coach is doing, but just my own personal experience was my parents, they maybe one time playing 20 years of sports, and one time as a kid they might have said something to a coach, but let coaches coach, and that's my takeaway. How about, what are your thoughts on that?
So, the way I feel is similar to you. I think that coaches, are volunteers. They do it for their love, hopefully for the love of the game, hopefully to help the kids. And I agree, coaches should be able to coach without parent interference. Where we see issues a lot of times is where the parents are trying to live their lives through their kids. So they've got their kids out there, and little Johnny's playing soccer. Little Johnny doesn't want to be out there playing soccer. Little Johnny would rather be building sandcastles out of ant farms. But little Johnny's out there because mom and dad are driving little Johnny to be there because little Johnny's 7 years old, and that's what you're supposed to do at 7 years old, rather than recognizing the kid's interests.
Right.
So, Holy Cross, you mentioned that you were only scouted or really offered by one major school. I'm old enough to remember hearing about you playing when you were in high school. Why do you think that is? Do you think that that's because it's a smaller school, smaller division? I mean, you were a standout in high school.
Well, locally, and, appreciate that, but in South Jersey, yes, a little bit. But the thing was my measurements. That's what it was, is, I was short. I had short arms, not big enough. So I had all the knocks. And the guy next to me, good friend, played at Penn State, All-American there. We played next to each other, and he looked the part. So he was 6'5". He's what you want to weigh in high school, and built like an offensive lineman. And I just missed the mark on all these different things, so I had to make up for it in other ways.
So we hear about these, and I don't want to get too much into the NFL, but we hear about the combine, and we've seen all these athletes and guys who I'm friends with as well, so I don't want to put their business out there, who are combine superstars. They go out there, they perform, and all of a sudden their draft stock goes from, maybe a fringe 4th or 5th rounder to their first-round draft pick by the Philadelphia Eagles, not to mention any names, because they really performed well at the combine. They're fast. They've got a quick first step. They're very athletic, and they fail. What do you think about these metrics that they're using? Do you think that they're still usable?
There's something to the metrics, without a doubt is, typically there's, a point where you're big enough, you're good enough, and to bring academics, a point where you're smart enough and then hard work takes over. Hard work, determination, the grit that you put into it and put into every day, as long as there are certain marks where you're good enough and then everything else comes into play.
Now, we're going to talk throughout the show about your experience when you were in the NFL, and we're going to migrate eventually down to really what the main topic I want to talk about today, which is this book that you've written, you've co-written with your friend Rob Curley. But all of these things that you've done, and in the intro I talked about, the laundry list of things that make me, really feel bad about myself. Talk about family. I know that you've got a close family. Tell me the way they've inspired you, the way they've encouraged you.
Adam, don't sell yourself short, man. You have quite the, quite the CV. But to your question with family, they've been such a great support system. If I have a brother and sister, and my 2 parents are still local in New Jersey. My dad's a doctor, my mom's a nurse, and they've been, pivotal in when we were growing up, but even now in being such great role models for how to work. And that's one of the biggest things is, I'll just use my dad as the example. My mom, a heck of a work ethic. He goes to work at 7:30, gets done at 7, goes to the gym. Next day, same thing. 7:30, 7 goes to the gym. And he set a great example. They both did for work ethic, for my brother, my sister, and I.
It's creating routines, right?
100%.
It's all about creating a sustainable routine and the cadence behind that routine so it just keeps going. So no matter where you are, you follow that routine.
And that's where, you just said it, wherever you are. I've been in Spain for the past year, and, it's creating a routine wherever you're at. And, no, that's the thing after sports is nobody creates that routine for you. As an athlete, coaches are, they're building it. But athletes after sports have to be able to create that routine themselves. And, I'm fortunate to have great role models on how to do that.
Well, outside of your family, and look, family plays a very important role. And I think as a parent, one of the things that we stress is we only have so much time with our kids, and who are the outside forces that are really influencing our kids? Who else was an influence to you? Who else really helps you get to where you are, help create that mindset?
My co-author, Rob Curley. So I met this guy when we were 13 years old, in homeroom at Holy Cross High School. And he was a standout quarterback. But even more in today, we're both the same age, standout person where it's all about who you surround yourself with. And I've been fortunate to be able to surround myself with people like him and others who make you want to be better and push you to be the best you can be.
Well, I agree with that, and I think that one of the lessons that you can take away, and especially for the younger audience members, surround yourself with people that help you become a better person. And I'm not saying to be disingenuous, but the whole idea is, all boats rise with the tide. You don't need any anchors.
That's my quote. I say all the time, all boats will rise.
I lent that to you.
Yeah.
All right. Good. So we're going to come back in a couple minutes. We're going to talk about, when we come back, what the NFL experience was like. I know that our listeners are curious about that. It's such an elite opportunity that is hard-earned, and I don't know that people recognize how hard it is to become an NFL player and then the elite level you need to maintain in order to keep that job. So we'll talk about that when we come back in the next segment.
Phil Costa is our special guest here on the Adam Malamut Show as we broadcast you on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. As Adam referenced, we will get more into Phil's path into the NFL, a member of the Big Uglies, Adam. And the Big Uglies are where the wars are won on the football field. So stay with us as we roll along on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Back in a moment.
Adam Malamut Show. Real people, real perspectives, real opinion.
Back here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Shout out to the entire Delaware Valley tuning in to the Adam Malamut Show.
Phil, when we left, we talked about how you got to the NFL. A lot of kids are playing flag football now, and the NFL has done a great job of rebranding flag football to make it part of the NFL flag football. And look, over the past couple years, especially with the concussion lawsuits, the NFL's had to do a lot to capture the confidence of the parents and the focus on the kids. These kids are playing flag football, emulating, their heroes. They're playing video games, emulating their heroes. Hopefully, not too many video games. And you're part of that group of heroes that they're playing. Trying to pretend that they are. And I think that as kids, we've all done the same thing, right? So talk for the audience about what it was like being an NFL athlete.
Awesome. I loved it. And football opens so many doors, so many opportunities. And for the kids, and, it's so important, though, to do well in school and do well in sports. And that's, it's what we talked about earlier. To come back to that, it's so big and so huge because, just like learning math, it's learning a playbook. And they're more intertwined than I think young athletes think of how important good grades are. But to bring it back, man, playing in the NFL was awesome. Awesome job.
You talked about school and sports. Talk about the intersection of school and sports, because I think people underestimate, especially people who aren't fans, the level of academia that goes into sports.
Well, to be able to learn a playbook, is not an easy thing. It takes a lot of time. We would be, so to give you a day in the NFL is you get there at 6:30. You're going to have a meeting at 7:30, and you have meetings, practice, workout. And you're done, your day at about 6 o'clock. You come home and you're studying the playbook. And especially as a rookie, you're studying the playbook because, some of these veterans have been there 10 years. They might know it. But not only that, once you learn it, week to week, the 16 weeks in the NFL, you're customizing your playbook for each team. So you're learning every week, and you have to be able, that was really one of the biggest things between college and pros to me is there's very, very few mistakes, in the NFL. And if you make mistakes, you will not be there long.
Well, they tested your ability to learn the playbook because very early in your career, especially as an undrafted free agent, they put you in as a starter. And in doing that, talk about throwing feet in the fire, right?
Yeah, that's the thing is where, I might have, lacked in other areas with size or speed or height, arm length, is one of my knocks, but made up for in being able to learn the playbook better, study the opponent better, and, be able to predict, what's going to happen to put the teammates around me as well in better positions to win.
And they moved you from center to guard, and, those people may not realize they're really two distinctively different positions, right?
They are, it's you have a little more responsibility as a center. You watch Kelsey out there with the Eagles, love watching him play, and he's putting everybody on the same page. Where guard is, you're doing that a little bit, but, the center is the quarterback of the offensive line, and that's the person who has the ultimate say on what happens and what doesn't happen on that given play. This after the quarterback. Quarterback's number one, you're number two.
So this playbook, how big's a playbook?
It's thick, it's 5-6 inch book. Nowadays it's probably ½ inch because a lot of it's on an iPad.
Right.
But a lot of data. Yeah, it's a big playbook.
And from the start of OTAs or training camp, how much of that are you expected to know?
Everything.
So the takeaway for the young people out there is you may be athletically gifted, but it doesn't mean that if you are an elite athlete, you're going to make it into the NFL if you can't read, comprehend, and really understand the academics of playbook, right?
And a lot of these athletes, I mean, you look at Andrew Luck, to use a Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, these are smart people. And they learn the playbook, they customize it each week. And as a rookie in the NFL, my experience, you're going to get 4 or 5 reps practice, where you get to show what you got. And if you make one mistake in those 4 or 5 reps, you just messed up, 20% of your plays, 25% of your plays. So there's no room for mistake. It's for mistakes. It's more, show me what else you got while you're playing.
So you love the NFL, but you retired at 26. Why'd you retire?
So I loved playing, and physically, if I could have kept playing, I would. The year before, I had ankle surgery. And I had a fracture in my back where, it was tough to get through that 4th year. But I loved playing, and unfortunately it was due to injury.
And it's so important, and I've had other athletes on the show, and I've had a number of athletes who are friends. It's so important for people to have a backup plan. Did you have a backup plan at that point?
Hey, you know what? I did not. And I can remember sitting there speaking to the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts and the general manager at the time. We're sitting at a table like this, and I said, I don't know what I want to do next. I just physically know my body can't do this. And it was a tough conversation, man. It was not easy. I was 26 at the time, and I didn't know what the next steps would be. And that's probably partly, and we can go into that a little more, but, the book I just wrote, The Transition Playbook, it's takeaways from what athletes did. So these are people who were successful and still are successful after sports.
Now, before we get into the transition playbook, for a guy who didn't have a plan, you did an awful lot. So before we got to the book, right, you traveled, you went back to school, you worked.
Well, you know what it is? I think when you look at it now, that was 5 years ago, and you can stack these things and say, okay, look at everything you did. That doesn't show the hardships you went through. And to use football as the example is I know players who play for 10 years, they scrap every day. But you look at the end of their career, you play for 10 years, they must have been amazing. Knowing that guy, it's like they scrapped for 10 years every single day. And, my experience after, just going to business school, to get into business school, what I had to do, that doesn't show up on your resume. And that's what's different about it.
So let's start talking about the transition playbook, and we'll come back in the next segment. So we talked about your experience after the NFL briefly. What was your inspiration for the transition playbook?
It's because I struggled. So I struggled with the transition, and I had people who helped me get through that. And really, so what the book is, it's 100 athletes from 30 different sports, 25 Olympians in the book, who were successful as athletes, and now they share their advice on how to be successful after sports. And they're CEOs, doctors, lawyers, sales professionals, and they give their best tips so people don't have to struggle the way that I did.
All right, when we come back from break, we're going to talk about the transition playbook.
Cool.
This is the Adam Malamut Show on Talk Radio 1210, WPHT. Back in a moment.
From the Malamut and Associates Law Studios, this is the Adam Malamut Show.
Back here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. One reminder as Adam rolls into the summer of 2019, stay tuned for details about a live roundtable conversation on location. The Adam Malamut Show will be live at Chickies and Pete's in Marlton. Details to follow. Adam?
So, Phil, when we took a break, we were starting to talk about the transition playbook for athletes, how elite athletes win after sports. And you said you had 100 approximately athletes participate in some fashion, whether it was through their experience or their guidance. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so what we did, we got over 100 athletes, 25 Olympians from around the world, and from 30 different sports, men, women. It was super important for us to find diversity in this book. And obviously men, women, black, white, gay, transgender. We hit a little bit of everything because athletes are these different, areas. They're everything. They're, and parents, this book, what we believe is going to be the go-to book in this area for athletes transitioning. It's been really well received so far, and we're super lucky with the people who are buying it to support their athletes.
So without spoiling the book, because I want people to go and buy the book and read the book, and I had an opportunity to preview it, and I appreciate the copy that you brought me today. I'm for certain going to sit down and read it myself. So give us a little bit of a preview. Give us a teaser. Tell us about some of the athletes involved.
So, some of the athletes, we have an Olympian, Karen Davies. She's an Olympic rower, and she went on to, get a JD at Columbia. She has an MBA from Oxford, an undergraduate from Harvard. And it was pretty cool. We were talking to her yesterday and thanking her for her contribution. And, the story I told her that we share about her, which is she is in 2012, she's in the Olympic Village in London. And you imagine, she's been training for this her entire life, and especially for these last 4 years for the event she's going to go do tomorrow, the rowing event. And the night before, you'll appreciate this as a lawyer, is she's filling out clerkship applications, to get a job after law school. The next day, she goes out and wins a gold medal. So there are athletes who are doing this, and she's just embodies what the transition playbook for athletes is about.
So one of the other people I saw that participated, one of my partners is a huge New England Patriots fan, lives and dies with the Patriots. It's not him, but his brother, Chris Gronkowski, right?
So Chris is incredible. Chris, we were roommates in college together. I played with Chris in Dallas our first year, and Chris was recently on Shark Tank. And
I saw that.
You see that? Yeah, he killed it. He's doing some incredible things as an entrepreneur. Right now, he's got 2 multi-million-dollar businesses. And here's the thing: is people know the last name, but Chris is smart, and he would have made it happen without it. Guarantee. And he's another person who shares advice on business in the book.
So there's a lot of self-help books. A lot of self-help books that talk about transition, a lot of self-help books that talk about athlete transition. How's this book different?
Right. So, Adam, it was as simple as the books out there, when I read them, weren't good enough. There was a problem, and we created a solution for it. And that's how most, products do come out. But what we found, and what I found in this book is, there's 2 types of transition books that are written. The first one is written by the expert sports psychologist who uses big words and doesn't speak to the athlete. They write it white papers and they write it for other PhDs. That was out. I didn't connect with that. The next one is written by the former athlete who has found success after sports. The issue with that is it was 200 pages of biography with the advice on transition on page 50, page 70. So what we did with the transition playbook for athletes is we took that great advice from page 50 and 70, condensed it, and made that one chapter. And we did that for 100 athletes. And we do have the expert sports psychologist in the book as well. We have 5 different sports psychologists from around the country, really from around the world, and they share their advice. So we're getting it from both ends.
So when you talk about elite athletes, what comes to mind is it really limits, right? It's a narrow field, although some of us in the room may think that we were once an elite athlete. We know that we weren't. But, how do you get folks who aren't elite athletes to pick up what sounds like very relatable material in your book?
Well, you were telling me about your wrestling back in high school. So, it's definitely, there is crossover. And here's where it is, Adam, is for the same reason that bodybuilders do cardio and sprinters lift weights. There's crossover. You take the best of the, best advice, and that's where we hope that people who are going through other transitions, military, retirement is another big one, and they'll be able to take these best principles and apply them, even though it is unique to sports sometimes, but you can take that principle and apply it to what you're doing.
Let's go back for a second, and we're talking about the transition. I don't think people really understand and appreciate the transition. So as an athlete, you're, physically, you're conditioned. You're in presumably the best condition of your life. You're the belle of the ball, right? You walk into any room and people gravitate to you and want to talk to you and want to hear, what the Dallas Cowboys plans are for the season, or is Tony Romo going to make it back, or they're trying to fill their fantasy football rosters. But the transition's so much more than that, right? There's families involved, there's finances, there's an entire change of lifestyle. Before we go to break, give us a quick rundown on what transition really is for athletes.
Well, it's different for everyone. And that's where, why we did want to get such a diverse population of 100 athletes, because I'll grab onto something different than, my co-author Rob did or that you will in the book. But here's one thing we found, from this research is the earlier an athlete starts to prepare for the inevitable transition, the more successful they're going to be. And that's across the board in every sport. One thing that is, without a doubt, athletes can take away from this book.
Fantastic. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the transition playbook for athletes, how elite athletes win after sports. I can't wait to hear more.
Phil Costa is our special guest here for the full hour on the Adam Malamut Show. We'll get to our final break on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT.
Real people, real perspectives, real opinion. Now back to Adam Malamut.
And back here live on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, Phil Costa is our special guest for the full hour with Adam. The name of the book, The Transition Playbook for Athletes, How Elite Athletes Win After Sports. Adam?
So we were talking about this being the transition playbook for athletes. Tell me how it transitions or how it works for other life transitions.
So there's certain principles that, there's a lot of crossover. And let's just talk to self-identity. When you're done playing sports, you're not the athlete anymore. Well, if you worked as a lawyer for 30 years and you retire, you're not the lawyer anymore. You have to be something new. And to be able to really deal with that and understand how you find the next thing, how you find your next passion, we hope readers take that away from this book and can help them find that.
One of the things I find exciting about this topic is, and I kind of thought that you would go that direction, and I was hoping you would, but I think that this is really relatable for any transition in your life. You look at kids going into the next level of school. They're changing from middle school to high school to transition, right? So you have certain things that you have to keep in mind from your successes that you had in middle school and take away some of that fear that you may have going into the bigger school and going to the next level, going from college to graduate school, looking for a career. Is that all things that, the lessons can be taken from your book on that as well?
So, it's funny as we're going along with, the book's not even out yet. It'll be out about a week and a half, but it's been about a 3-year process. And we focused it on, it's college, pro, and Olympic. But what we're finding is that people who are going through other life transitions, and people who are going through retirement, and a lot of parents say to me, for my junior and senior in high school, we think this is very applicable, and they read the book, and that's what they're telling me. So I'm like, that's awesome. I'm glad it's expanding just the college, pro, and Olympic athletes.
So if you had to pick your 3 biggest takeaways from the book, what would they be?
Prepare. And the earlier you prepare, the more successful you're going to be. And athletes from all over share that story, and they share examples of how they did it, how they wish they might have done it a little better. We have some Philly athletes in this book. We have the Flyers, Bill Clement, Eagles, Chad Lewis, Eagles, Jamal Jackson, and they share some of the best advice in the book. These athletes who, were successful athletes, And now, not always through a very, straight, narrow road. It's been ups and downs, but they found success now.
One of the things that I want to get the listeners and readers of your book excited about is we look at these athletes when they're on television, when they're in prime time, and when they leave, part of their difficulty in transitioning is, there's this huge fall off of public presence. And I think that's something that a lot of athletes have difficulty with, but it's something for the listener to be mindful of because, as difficult as it was for them to make it to a high level, it's probably even more difficult for them to transition out of that professional career. Is that right?
Well, I'll share my story with that, and it is funny because it happened in South Jersey. So, when I first started working in medical device sales, I would have to make sales calls to doctors' offices. And I go into the doctor's office, I'm wearing my suit, look professional, and I say, is Dr. So-and-so here? And at that moment, the doctor comes out and, standing behind the secretary, and the doctor doesn't even say a word, just waves his hand and go away pretty much. So I learned that, I better make better sales calls, that's number one. But I learned that things have changed, where 18 months prior, Adam, I'm sitting there signing autographs, getting paid a lot of money to sign autographs, and people are waiting in line to see me. And now I walk into this doctor's office, and it was very humbling. So I got to see that firsthand.
Do you think that had anything at all to do with the fact that you were a cowboy in Eagles territory?
It might have been. I think he had like a cowboy or Eagles towel, hanging out of the back of his medical coat. So maybe.
We have signs around the office here and around the studio that have photos of Cowboys and former Cowboys players. They get completely different treatment. Were you offered coffee when you came in?
What's funny is I wasn't actually.
There's a reason for that. Yeah, there's a reason for that. You're a Cowboy.
Right.
We're going to still work on converting you back. Get you back to the good guys. So if you had to choose one lesson that stood out above the rest from the book and something that you wanted to pass on to the audience without giving too much more away from the book, I feel like we're getting deep into your book. What's that lesson?
And this is something that's maybe a little more specific for athletes, is as an athlete, when you go to these events, and I was talking to Eagles player last week, and, he pretty much, he asked me the same question. He says, what's one thing from the book? And as I handed him one, and I said, it's this, man. When you go to these events and you're the celebrity athlete of these events, don't go there as a celebrity athlete. Go there as a guy who needs a job, who wants to network, who wants to connect and meet with people. And that'll bear so much fruit. Where we have an Olympian, Summer Sanders, you probably know the name in the book, and she says the same thing. She says, show up there not as a celebrity athlete and let other people be part of your process. And, whatever that is for the current athlete, whatever that means, let them be a part of your process while you're playing. Because after sports, I guarantee they're going to pick up your phone call.
Now, I know you personally, and I know that you're a networker. You're a guy who literally travels the world and finds people, embraces them, speaks to them, speaks with them. It's not that easy for everybody, right?
Well, here's the thing, and here's a light bulb moment. If you met me 5 years ago, Adam, I don't know if you'd be saying the same thing, honestly. Is the light bulb moment I had after sports was when you're an athlete, everything's come to you. Your agents come to you, the business opportunities, everything's incoming calls. After sports, they have to be outgoing. People will still take the athlete's call. They're happy to take your call, but you have to pick up the phone and make it. And that's where athletes really, really struggle because, in college and especially in the pros, a lot of things have been done for us where the light bulb moment in an athlete who does do that is so far ahead of the game, it's incredible.
You and I have talked about the humility that you've gained and your sense of giving back. Talk to me a little bit about your charitable commitments.
So with this book, we had 100 of these athletes who they gave their time and advice to help other athletes. So we want to do the same thing. All pre-sale proceeds from this book will be donated to the Athlete Foundation. And what they do is they support 10,000 student athletes across the country, and it's going towards youth sports. So the money's going towards a great cause. They have unbelievable people running that organization, and we're glad to be able to help them out and be a part of that.
And that's Athlife, ATHLIFE,
Yes,
correct?
sir. Athlife Foundation.
So where can the listeners buy your book?
So right now, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles for your local listeners. June 1st, we're going to be at Barnes & Nobles right down the road here. You can throw a rock to it in Cherry Hill on Haddonfield Road from 12 to 2. And we're going to be there, signing books, and would love for people to come out and meet them. But from there, it's, they can go on our website, thetransitionplaybook.com, or follow us on Instagram. We're doing some cool posts on IG at the Transition Playbook.
So during one of our future podcasts, we're going to go live, and we're working out the dates for a live appearance at Chickies and Pete's in Marlton.
Awesome.
So if you guys are available, I'd love to have you come out. We should have a good audience, and you being a South Jersey guy, Cowboys fan, you guys being from South Jersey, it gives us an opportunity to hopefully get some folks interested in your book and talking about your book there as well.
Well, here's the thing. I'm sure you see it in South Jersey. There's Cowboy fans everywhere. And I guarantee Chickies and Pete's, even if we came out or didn't, there's still going to be Cowboys fans. They're everywhere. They're America's team for a reason, All
right, listen, this whole America's team stuff. So I don't know if I had shared this with you, but, we have an office fantasy football league.
Yeah.
And my team's name is Nomo Romo.
Romo.
So you know where I stand on this. But listen, I want to thank you. I want to wrap things up. I want to thank you very much. It's been a great show. I'm super excited. I can tell you I'll be digging into the book tonight, and I'll probably be texting you tomorrow about it.
Please do.
But thank you. Thank you for coming out, and I wish you nothing but the best of success.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
All right, good stuff from Adam Malamut and our special guest today, Phil Costa, who joined Adam here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. The Adam Malamut Show, real people, real perspectives, real opinion. And following today's show, we add real conversation. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the Adam Malamut Show. On behalf of our guest, Phil Costa, thank you very much, Phil, and of course our gracious host, Adam Malamut. I'm Joe Krause. See you next time, everybody.
This program is a paid commercial announcement and in no way represents the views of WPHT or its management.